Okay, right, Greek instrumentation then. So we're going to split this into three categories. We're going to start with string instruments. We're going to go to wind instruments, and finally we're going to end on percussion instruments. Okay, I'm just going to move my camera out of the way there. Okay, so string instruments. A lot of these are based around string instruments that you would most closely associate with guitar. Actually, so the lyra, we can have a look here. Looks sort of like a guitar, sort of like a violin. So it's quite a small instrument. The neck protrudes from the body here, and it has three strings. Now this is bowed. Okay, this is a bowed instrument. It sounds a lot like a violin or some of the Indian classical music that we've heard as well. All right, so that's the lyra. The bouzouki is probably the most common Greek instrument. So the bouzouki looks very much like a guitar, just with a sort of rounder, smaller body. Okay, and it has 8 strings, usually two strings doubled to where you would find one string. Sometimes there's only 4. Okay, but it sounds like a guitar, plays like a guitar in exactly the same way. Frets, strings, usually with a plectrum. The lute is a very old instrument. All right, the lute is a smaller guitar, lots of strings, and there's loads of versions of the lute. There's an English lute, a Scottish lute, there's a French lute, a Spanish lute, and then there's also the Greek lute. And they're just very small guitars, really. And they play both chords and also sort of lyrical passages as well, melodic passages. The uti looks a lot like a lute, apart from the head of the instrument is bent down here. Okay, but it's played in exactly the same way. Slightly bigger body, so it has a lower pitch sound, and a shorter neck. Okay, so there's far less range to the uti. Okay, so they're your string instruments, and like I said, very much all based around guitars, apart from the lyra, which is bowed, right, which is more like a violin. So our woodwind instruments, okay, some strange sounding instruments, but they're very much linked to Western instruments. So the floyera, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I have no idea actually, to be honest. But the floyera is a wooden flute. All right, so it sounds like sort of panpipes, flute sound. The karamudza. This is a very strange sounding instrument. We'll do some listening next week. The karamudza is a sort of cross between a flute and a clarinet. Okay, now it looks like the flutes in that it's usually wooden. All right, and you cover up the holes with fingers in exactly the same way. But on the end, it's got a reed. All right, and it's actually a double reed. So there's a double reed on the end here, and what that gives it is a very sort of ducky sound. It sort of sounds like a duck. Is the only way to describe it. So it's a bit like an oboe. It's a bit like a clarinet. Okay, but it sounds very distinctive, and you'll hear it almost immediately. So that's the karamudza. And then the bagpipes is very much like the Scottish bagpipe. So we've got a sort of body here that's made out of it's either made out of a bladder, or it's made out of a stomach, or it could be sewn together out of like hide, animal hide. You've obviously you blow air into it, and then there's a small section at the end, the sort of bell of the instrument, where the sound comes out, and you can change the pitches. It's unlike the Scottish bagpipes in that you don't have multiple sort of pipes coming off the end. You usually just have one pipe, all right, which means that you don't get a multitude of different sounds. You get very sort of static sound, singular sound. So that's the woodwind, and then finally we've got the percussion. Okay, another percussion. So the dholi is pitched drums. So there's 3 on this picture, but there's usually 2. All right, you just have a higher pitched drum and a lower pitched drum. You play them with sticks. The tubaleki this is heavily influenced by North African drums. All right, it has a sort of cone-shaped body, very tight drum head. There's actually one in the music department. It's silver, so I'll show you it when I'm in the building. But you play it with your hands, and then the defi is a tambourine. Okay, so it looks like a tambourine, sounds like a tambourine. Pretty much is a tambourine for all intents and purposes. So that's the defi. So yeah, the duli, tabeleki, and the defi. All right, and so all you got to remember is like that's a pitched drum played with sticks. That's a hand drum. This is tambourine drum. So they're the instruments. They're the traditional folk instruments that exist in Greek music. So what we've got to do is make sure that we can remember these. So I'm just going to test you on in the assignment section on what you remember of these, and then next week we'll do some listening and we'll try to recognise them in traditional Greek music. Right. So we're going to have this sort of layout for Greek, Israeli, Palestinian. We're going to go through all the instruments this week, all the traditional sort of purposes of the music, and then next week we'll do all the listening. All right, because we've got a bit of time. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, guys, and I will see you in the next session. Ta.